It's echoing, so I'll stay on mute until I'm ready to talk, so we won't have that echo.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are so excited to have you all joining us today. My name is Michelle. I'm from Sercante, and I will be moderating today's session. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. Yes, these sessions are going to be recorded and will be available on demand after the event, and we'll also be following up with them via email. If you have a question, post it in the Q&A tab above, and at the end of this session, if we have time, we'll get to it. And lastly, use the chat. There's emojis, GIFs, and more. We want to hear from you. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today, Erin Duncan, who has an awesome session for us on business units.
Hey everyone, good morning or good afternoon. Today we're going to talk about standardizing account engagement business units. You may hear me refer to them a bunch as BUs, just so I don't have to say it every time. But yeah, so let's get started. Before we dive in, I want to thank our sponsors. Without them, this event would not be possible. All right, so our agenda today, we're going to just touch on why standardization between your BUs is important. Then we'll go through some tips and tricks for standardizing your BUs. And then I'll show you guys the new bulk asset copy flow that allows you to copy assets between BUs. And then we'll go through some considerations of that flow. So first up, why standardization is important. I mean, the general idea is the more standard your business units are, the easier they are going to be to use and to manage. If you have your marketers switching between business units, you don't want them to be a completely unique environment every time, because it's going to be hard for them to find what they need, name the assets the correct way, apply the correct suppression lists, zero in on the correct data. So you really want those environments to be mostly similar across the board. It'll also help prevent sync errors. So if your business units are standardized, it's going to make sure everything can sync to Salesforce correctly. The required fields are there. It's using the correct data, and you're not having to constantly monitor and clear your sync errors. It's going to allow your admins to better manage the BUs if they're setting up the same processes in each BU to look for inactive prospects, prospects that need cleaning up, prospects we want to suppress from all our marketing initiatives, all of that. And then another big benefit of it is if your business units are standardized, then you really only need one set of documentation and training materials. You're not going to have to customize the documentation and training for each business unit if they are kind of all using the same foundation. All right, so let's get into some tips and tricks for standardizing your business units. The first one, and like the most important tip I can give any business unit org, is document your field mappings. This is something I do for all of my business unit clients. It really just helps us get on the same page of all the business units are using these fields. They're using them in the same way. They understand what this field is telling them. And this is going to keep your data clean and really prevent those sync errors. So what I recommend when you're documenting your field mappings is you look at your fields and make sure they're consistent across what they're named, what type of field it is, whether it's text, drop down, radio button, the sync behavior, because you don't want one BU having Pardot as the system of truth and another BU having Salesforce as the system of truth, because your marketers may not understand that the data is getting overwritten by another system. And then usage, you want to make sure, your first BU and your second BU are using the fields the same way. If they're using them in two different ways, you're going to have a lot of dirty data, and it's going to be unclear what this field is telling them, especially if you ever have any prospects that switch from one BU to another. So I said I did this for all of my business unit clients. This is an example of how I document the fields. Now, I know it looks a little intense, but I promise if you fill this out for your business units, it's really going to pay off in the long haul. And I do have a template of this available. Michelle, if you want to post that link in the chat. So if you want to copy my template and do it for your own business units, you definitely can. But this Excel sheet is going to tell you every single thing you need to know about your fields in your business units. It'll record what the field is named, what field type it is, if there's predetermined values, what the field is telling users, which BUs it's in, if it's syncing to Salesforce, what object it's syncing to in Salesforce. And then that way, if your account engagement users are trying to zero in on the right fields to use, maybe for their segmentation or their dynamic lists, they don't have to do trial and error and try out different list criteria and try out different criteria to make sure they're getting the right thing. They can look at the sheet and zero in on what field is going to be correct to use here. Because your marketing users are not always going to have access to get into the admin side of your account engagement org and look at those fields and look at what the predetermined values are there. So this template will really give them everything they need without having to worry about access issues. All right, tip 2 is universal naming conventions and folder structures. So you definitely want to make sure this is standardized across your business units. So as users switch between business units, they know where things are, they know how to name them, they can find the assets they want. Another big benefit to this is it also makes it very clear to your users what business unit they are in. So I say that because when you are in account engagement, if you're on the account engagement settings tab, you can see what business unit you're in. This is the BU switcher up here, and it's going to tell you what business unit you're in, and you can use this drop down to switch. If you're on any other tab, it doesn't tell you what business unit you're in. So you can't really tell unless you go back to that settings tab. But if your assets are all named with the business unit name in them, so say I have a US business unit and a Canada business unit, and all of my assets in the Canada business unit start with CA, it's going to be very clear what business unit I'm in at all times. And definitely take this from me because I have spent an hour building emails in the wrong business unit because I thought I was in the other one. So putting this in your naming convention definitely helps prevent errors. All right, our third tip is opt into Salesforce side user management. So this is going to allow you to control all of your access to account engagement and your BUs on the Salesforce side, and it maps your Salesforce profiles to your account engagement roles. What this looks like is instead of managing your users in account engagement, you will go into the setup side of Salesforce, go to business unit setup, and then you can manage users for each business unit here. So what you'll do is essentially have the search set to users, and you can drag them from available to selected. Now, one additional tip for this one more screenshot to show you. Then after you select the users that have access to that business unit, you go into account engagement and map your Salesforce profiles to your account engagement roles. One additional tip for this, and this is something I use in all business unit environments, and it really, really helps, is instead of adding individual users to that Manage User tab, create public groups for each of your business unit. Why this is helpful is if you're in Salesforce and you're looking at a user, there's nothing that tells you what business unit they have access to. You can only see that by going to business unit setup and manage user and seeing if they're there. However, if you use public groups do show up on the Salesforce user. So you can hover over this public group membership and see which business units they have access to. So it makes it a lot easier to add and remove users from the business units, as well as see, which ones they have access to. So what I do to set this up is I'll create a public group for each business unit and then one for all business units. So if someone needs access to all, I don't have to add them to multiple public groups. I just have to add them to the one. Then when you go to business unit setup, you can switch this view from user to public group and then just drag the public group over to the selected members. And then that way, if they're in the public group, they get access to the business unit and you can see it on the user's profile. All right. Fourth tip, unifying your segmentation and cleanup efforts. So if you are segmenting out partners, competitors, or you have a list of people you want to suppress from all marketing initiatives, even though the criteria may change between business unit depending on their needs, make sure those lists are named the same. So if a user is sending out an email from, it doesn't matter, the US or the Canada business unit, they know, this suppression list that is named this way has to be applied to all emails. Or if I need to see partners, it doesn't matter what business unit I'm in, I know the list is named this. It's going to make just the user experience go more smoothly, and it's going to prevent some of those common user errors that we see. Also, if you're doing anything to clean up your data or standardize your data, you're going to want to make sure those same processes are in each business unit. That way your admins can do their work of checking data, cleaning data, all of that in a uniform way. So this can include things like if you're standardizing your country and states, if you have rules set up to identify inactive prospects that you're either deleting or nurturing, or if you have any processes that, are identifying spam or prospects that need, cleanup. All right. And then our fifth tip here is ensure all BUs are using campaigns and campaign member statuses in the same way. This will really, really help your reporting. Because if your US business unit is using sent, attended, and absent for webinars, and your Canada business unit is using sent, registered, and absent, when you try to compare those two events against each other, it's kind of like comparing apples to oranges, and you're not going to easily be able to report on those two events against each other. So you want to make sure everyone is using, the same campaign types, the same campaign member statuses, the same statuses are marked as default and responded. And then that way you can do reporting across your business units without any issues. One thing you can do, which I highly recommend, is standardizing your campaign member statuses when a campaign is set up. So you can auto-generate campaign member statuses based off the campaign type. So essentially, if I go in and I set up a campaign and I say I'm doing a webinar, it'll take out the default campaign member statuses and put in the campaign member statuses that you want for that type without the user having to do anything. And it'll select, which one is the default, which ones are marked as responded. It does all of that for the user, so no one has to think about it. Also, if you want to report on events across business units, you can use parent campaigns. So definitely keep that in mind for your reporting. So if we're doing a webinar and both our US and our Canada business units are promoting it, we'll need a campaign for each business unit because they'll have to have a different record type to sync down. So we'd create, a webinar for BU A and a webinar for BU B, but then we have this parent campaign on top of them so we can do roll-up reporting and we can see this event as a whole instead of having to compare two campaigns against each other. All right, before we get into the bulk asset copy flow, I wanted to see if there was any quick questions about the tips. Let's see. Yeah, nothing like importing a list into the wrong BU and triggering the wrong automations. That is very true. And sorry, my dog just opened my door. Thought I had closed that all the way, but dogs find a way to surprise you. Can we get the auto-generate campaign member status link? Yes. I just want to copy. Okay. Sorry, Michelle, I should have sent you that one, but I forgot it was there. All right. So if you have any questions, keep putting them in chat. I'm going to go through the bulk asset copy flow now, and we'll cover considerations, and then we'll have a little bit more time for Q&A. So bulk asset copy flow. If you haven't heard about this yet, it did just come out as part of the summer 23 release. It was also included in the winter 24 release because there was little bits and pieces that still had to come out. But it should be in your org now if you are an account engagement user. And what this flow lets you do is copy assets between business units. So it is super helpful. It lets you copy custom fields, engagement studio programs, files, custom redirects, and email templates built in the classic builder. If you're using Lightning Builder, you can already copy those assets and point them at other BUs as is. So it doesn't do anything with the Lightning Builder. This is just classic. So let's go into my demo org and I'll show you how this runs. So I am in the setup side of Salesforce and I'm going to go to Flow. And I need the account engagement bulk asset copy flow. All right, so this is what you're going to see when you open it. You don't want to change anything. You just want to run it. So I'm going to hit run up here. Okay, so let me make this a little smaller so it's bigger for you guys. There we go. All right, so first thing we're going to do was select our source business unit. So I'm going to do business unit A, destination business unit B. And we'll do next. So here we can select our assets. So it's got a section for each asset type. And you can select, it recommends up to 5 of each asset type. So you don't want to select like 20 email templates all at once. Form handler and dynamic content and layout template, that was not there before. So it looks like this is a brand new things that were added to this flow, which I'm excited about, but wish I had known before this presentation so I could add it. So I will check those out and probably update my blog post on this flow. So if you want to hear about copying these assets, I'll definitely update that blog post. But here, so let's select some email templates. And we'll do a custom redirect, a banner ad, and that's all I'm going to select for now. We'll do next. It'll have us confirm the assets here. And one thing I like to do is take a screenshot of the assets I've selected because of the confirmation screen. If any of them fail, it doesn't clearly point out which ones failed. So I take a screenshot here so I can compare it to my confirmation screen later in case anything failed. I can make sure I remember which one did. So we'll do next. Now here you need to select your destination folder, your campaign, and your tracker domain for the new assets. Anything that you copy in one run does have to have the same folder, campaign, and tracker domain. So if you need to change that information between your assets, you just want to run this flow a couple times. So I'm going to put this in my automations folder. We'll select my Dreamforce campaign and my tracker domain. And now we'll just do copy assets. So here, everything copied over. So it's confirming the 3 assets I selected. If any of these failed, it's not going to have any message to say this asset failed or this asset failed because it just won't be listed here. So that's one of the reasons why I take a screenshot at the confirm your assets one and then compare it to the copy confirmation so I can see if anything's missing and I can see what exactly is missing. And now we'll just do finish and it'll redo the flow so you can run it again. but those assets are already in my other BU. So I'm going to go back to the slide deck because there are a good bit of considerations with this flow just because it's brand new that you'll want to keep in mind. So copying custom fields. When you copy a custom field from one BU to the other, it's going to copy the field name, the API name, and the field type. It is not going to copy your field mapping, your sync behavior, if you have predetermined values, like if it's a drop-down or a radio button, and these optional settings down here. You will have to go into your other BU and still remap the field and set up kind of the optional features on it. So it really just brings over kind of the structure and the name. Engagement Studio programs. So when you copy them with this flow, it's going to copy your structure, your wait steps, and if it has a step that's involving a field that's in both business units, it'll copy that as well. But it's not going to copy the Engagement Studio setup details like your recipient list, your suppression list, send days and times, if prospects can enter more than once, or your individual assets. And the reason why it doesn't do assets, recipient list, suppression lists, even though you may have assets or lists that are named exactly the same across your BUs, they're going to have a different ID. So the flow can't match things on name. It does everything by ID. So that's kind of why it's not going to put it in the ESP when it copies it over. So the flow will copy your structure, and then you just have to go put in all of the details once copied. Email templates. So when you copy them, it is going to change your sender to general user, name of replace, and email of replace at example.com. Even if your sender of your email template is in both BUs, it's going to do this. It just makes you have to go into the email template, confirm all your details, confirm all of your setup before sending it. Email templates containing dynamic content do not copy over. I've tested this a bunch and they fail every time. That's likely because dynamic content too also has a unique ID for the business unit. So even if I have the same dynamic content set up in multiple BUs, it's going to have a different ID. So the flow doesn't know which one to copy and insert into the email. Also, if you copy an email to a business unit and then you make changes in the original business unit and copy it over again, it's going to create a new email template. It is not going to update the email template that's already there. So definitely keep that in mind. And then finally, custom redirects. When you copy those, it's going to bring over the details up here, or for the campaign in the folder, the details that you set in the flow. It'll bring over your Google Analytics parameters, but it's not going to bring over your completion actions. So you will have to re-add those. And then for files, I have tested probably 12 different file types. The only file types that I can get to copy over are images. Everything else has told me, or not told me it failed, but it just didn't show up on the confirmation screen. So keep that in mind when you're copying things as well. So I've added some resources here. If you didn't catch them in the chat, they're definitely linked here. We've got our field mapping template. I've got a blog post on the asset flow, and I will update that on the new types that were showing up today. We have a blog on standardizing your business units that kind of goes more in depth into the how that I was able to get into in our short time together today. And then some of the other tips I talked about. So folder structures and naming conventions and protected campaign member statuses. I also have that linked here. So I wanted to leave some time for Q&A at the end because I know business units, the environments are super unique. So I wanted to make sure we had time to talk through any unique questions or anything I need to revisit.
Yeah, guys, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and put them in that Q&A tab. We did have one. Let me see if I can share it. But I'm not sure if we need a little bit more information here. Can
I
you
think we
SQL these out of the Pardot API?
SQL what out is the detail I need. You can do a lot with the Pardot API to see where things are used, to see where IDs are, so on and so forth. But I need a little bit more detail on that. Ben, if you're still here.
He said the mapping for the field for the template.
The mapping for the field. Oh, I think so. I think you can pull the field name, field ID. Oh, sorry, the field name, the field API name, and the type. Not 100% sure if you can do the Salesforce syncing. I will check with our Pardot, our account engagement expert, or our API expert, Mike Cruiser, to see. You know what? Actually, hold on. I know Cruiser built a tool that does essentially field trip for account engagement, and it can look at the fields and how often they're used. So I bet you can pull that through the API, but I will check.
Okay, we have about 4 more minutes, guys. So if you have any questions, now is a great time to put them in the chat.
Yeah. Another thing that came out in the winter release, just if you're using business units, you are likely using account engagement sandboxes too. So in the last release, a new flow came out that's going to allow you to copy account engagement sandbox assets to account engagement production. So that is brand new as of, I think, mid-October. I have not had a chance to play around with it yet, but I'm very excited to. So that is something you want to dig into in your org if you are using account engagement sandboxes. Okay, Tyler has a good question. What are your thoughts about a global business unit that acts as a master repository for different regions? I don't love it. I've had a few clients who have explored using either a global business unit or like a staging business unit where they go into that business unit first before they get dispersed. The problem that we typically run into is that business units can have one of two ways of syncing. They can either be like classic syncing, where someone can only exist in one business unit at a time unless they're duplicated in Salesforce. Or you can have cross business unit syncing, where one lead or contact can be in multiple account engagement business units. So if you have this global business unit idea, you essentially need one business unit that's a cross BU. So that would allow prospects who are in other BUs to also be in it without duplicates in Salesforce. But you probably don't want the business units that it's feeding to be cross business units. And that just gets real messy. And I haven't, like, the clients I've talked this idea through really didn't see the benefits of a global BU after we kind of talked through the technical considerations of doing this cross versus not cross BU syncing. And typically, a prospect, if they enter one business unit and you determine they belong in another, it's very easy for them to switch with marketing data sharing. So I don't really find the global business unit idea one that I have found the right client that's a good fit for. So.
All right, awesome. Thank you again, Erin, for an amazing session. If you have any additional questions for our speakers today, you can always reach out to them directly in the event chat. Thanks again for joining us, and thank you to our sponsors for helping to make our dream happen. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.